Welcome to Smart Manufacturing Mindset, where we challenge guests to think differently about manufacturing. We'll explore the nuances that hide in plain sight behind the acronyms, techno jargon, and misinformation to get to the truths that hold real value for real people in the industry.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mike Yost, and I'm your host today, and I'm glad that you could join us for this next edition of the CESMII Smart Manufacturing Mindset LinkedIn Live series. In every event, we challenge ourselves and our guests to think differently about smart manufacturing. We challenge ourselves to think differently because there are so many dimensions to smart manufacturing. If you've heard any of our shows over the past year, you've heard us talk about things from technology to education to the building of the ecosystem. You've heard us talk about the convergence of IT and OT, as well as the convergence of digital capabilities with traditional lean manufacturing. So today I'm thrilled to talk with our panelists about industrial AI, data sharing, and value creation. There is nothing artificial about the intelligence of our guests here today. They represent a coordinating group, a subset of a larger group that has been working together over the last few years in a series of national workshops on this specific topic, and they're here with us today to share with us what they've learned and what they see coming forward for us. So I'd like to introduce just very quickly, we have from Seagate Technology, Vice President at Seagate is Sthitie. Welcome, Sthitie.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, I'm Sthitie. I'm the Vice President of Factory Applications for Seagate factories worldwide. Very happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you, Sthitie. We also have Jim Davis, who is the Vice Provost Emeritus of IT for UCLA, and also CESMII's Program Oversight and Principal Investigator. Welcome, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And introductions always throw me. They give me a jolt because when I think about AI and machine learning, I've been looking at this for 50 years, back when I started with Amoco Chemicals and was putting in digital systems and data acquisition and PLC systems. So many hats over 50 years. They all started with AI machine learning, and they spanned data, the infrastructure, networking, research, high-performance computing, and smart manufacturing and CESMII. So too many viewpoints, but they all roll into smart manufacturing, and looking forward to the discussion.
Outstanding. We are glad to have you here with us. We also have with us Bruce Kramer, who is a senior advisor from the U.S. National Science Foundation. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, I am at the National Science Foundation. At the NSF, we work closely with researchers at universities and in industry to try and identify the key scientific and technical problems for the future and develop solutions before they're needed. So I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Bruce. And last but not least, my good friend, Haresh Malkani, the Chief Technology Officer at CESMII. Welcome, Haresh.
Hey, Mike. Again, Chief Technology Officer at CESMII since 2018. And then prior to that, I've spent about 30 years in industrial R&D in the same space, smart manufacturing in one form or another. So looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. So as you can see, we have a breadth of experience, deep domain knowledge, lots of different perspectives represented here. So it's going to be a great conversation. And we want to jump into it, but first I want to just cover a few housekeeping items. First of all, for those of you who do not know CESMII, I would encourage you to get to know CESMII. Follow them on LinkedIn, check them out online. They are National Institute on Smart Manufacturing, a public-private partnership that is doing research and helping to build out education and build the ecosystem around smart manufacturing through events like this. Speaking of this event, this would not be possible if it wasn't for the support of SME, so we thank them as well for helping to support this series. We are streaming on LinkedIn at the moment, but unfortunately, we are not truly live. The situation of calendars and such forced us to pre-record this. So we definitely want you to go ahead and continue with putting your questions and comments in, because there are people online at the moment that are watching this you can interact with. And these conversations tend to stay open for a long period of time, and we will continue the dialogue through there. So please go ahead and contribute both now and down the road with the questions and comments that come in through this interface. The event is being recorded, obviously, and you'll be able to watch them later anywhere that you get your podcasts, like Apple and Spotify. And so, again, lastly, you can check out CESMII at CESMII.org, find out about membership options and the research projects that they're doing, the educational impact they're having, and all those sorts of things. So with that, let's get on with our conversation about industrial AI, data sharing, and value creation. And Jim, I'd like to start with you, if you're okay with that, and ask you to set the stage for us here. Tell us about the workshop activities, how this group represents the larger group, what you've learned, why now is a good time to tell us about it. Anything you think is appropriate to set the stage here.
Yeah, Mike, our group has been together for quite a while, since 2020. And I guess I'm the appropriate person to kick this off because I seem to act as the historian on some of these things. But if you think back to 2020, the resurgence of AI occurred, and it was getting a great deal of attention, but there actually was no attention in manufacturing. And so one of the things that we decided to do is we really did need to bring this to the attention of the U.S. in particular. You know, what's the role of AI in engineering and how is it going to work and so forth. So we, through the sponsorship of National Science Foundation, Bruce, I'm so glad to been working with you all this time, as well as NIST, we pulled together, we used the workshop format as a way to bring together experts across the country to really examine this question, again, of AI in advanced manufacturing. And from my perspective, it's AI in advanced smart manufacturing going forward. If you think back in those days, though, again, manufacturing was not really talking about this. We were still really focused on the factory side of it. And one of the things this workshop did is it brought together many, many experts, stakeholders across the country, and it really took a look at this. Is it really valuable? The answer is yes. There's significant value with AI on a number of fronts. And on the factory side, it has the value that we're all talking about today on the factory asset and the factory side, line operations, interoperability within factories and across factories, and then supply chains. These are all identified and showed to be of very, very high value. The other point that came through was the data. And there is a very, very strong recognition that manufacturing is very rich in data, and so it should be able to take advantage of data in very, very significant, robust, and strong ways. But that data is not there. It's not being used. And the question became, well, why not? How do we get there? How do we drive this? And where does the value, and how do we get to this value if the data is there, but we're not using it? And how do we get to these broad industry kinds of matters? So we as a group started talking about this. Well, it's a business model. There's technology, but it's a business aspect. And so what are the business models that drive this? So over the course of 4 workshops from 2020 to 24, we put together a set of recommendations. But over that same time, industry kind of warmed up to talking about this. AI started getting more and more momentum and more interest. And so we hit this convergence point where we've been talking about this for 4 years, and their industry was actually ready to hear some of these recommendations. And so we started up another workshop, and Sthitie and I have been working very closely on this again with NSF and this support with 12 semiconductor companies, fab operators. And we've asked the question, here's all these recommendations from the past 4 years. How do we execute on these? And so we're now sitting here today with this panel, and we'd like to share with you our observations as well as principles really that have taken these 12 companies forward, and how to do the adoption, how to derive value from AI, how to deal with the data situation and so forth, again, from a business model and a technical standpoint. So I know I took a few extra minutes, but I think it's important to kind of set this timing and overall industry context, because that's where we are. We want to share some real value that has come through with a year's worth of working with 12 companies doing this.
Excellent. Yeah, and it sounds to me like there's a lot of excitement. A lot of people are hearing about it, warming up to it, like you said. and the fact that you have engaged with folks and can start to make that, put some more structure to it of how to actually do it, I think is something everybody's going to want to hear about. So thank you for that. And Bruce, just from your perspective, from the NSF perspective, we talked a bit that this was not the standard workshop structure. So could you talk a little bit about what was different about the approach and why roundtables?
No, I'm happy to, Mike. You are correct. This isn't a workshop where 30 or 40 experts came together to share their insights and write a report. We experimented with the format in previous workshops and came up with the current format in order to encourage discussion among the participants, which turned out to be one of the most important characteristics of these workshops. Current applications of AI in manufacturing are focused in plant and usually on a single process, resulting in prohibitively high development cost and little applicability beyond the current process that's targeted. You're essentially starting from zero with each new application. We needed a real dialogue to get past that problem and show the benefits of working together to get more powerful data that could be used for solutions that would be useful for everyone in the process. The small group, multiple roundtable format promoted conversations between farsighted semiconductor industry leaders who need solutions and academic experts who need industrial quality data to innovate solutions that can process data at scale. The current standard in manufacturing companies is absolute protection of data, and that's extreme. The Seagate-led initiative has moved past that barrier to define protocols for making large quantities of production data available for AI researchers. This is a first, and it's momentous, and we're looking forward to deriving the benefits from this breakthrough.
Yeah, that does sound like we're crossing into certainly new ways of thinking about things, which is what we like to get into here with our series. So.
That's key, and it's really the most difficult thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that. So Sthitie, let's go to you. Can you tell everybody what brought you together as a manufacturing leader with this group and why this is important to you and your company?
Sure, thank you. Just giving a little bit of a history, over the past few years, within Seagate, we have really relentlessly pushed ourselves for AI deployments in our factories. And the value that we have seen being realized has been quite impressive. But what's even more impressive to me has been the realization that this is nothing compared to the value that we would realize it if we could do it at scale. And just to give you a perspective, the last 3 years, we have accumulated value realization of 180 million, and we're talking about piecemeal implementations. So you can extrapolate the potential here, right? But as we were talking about scale, the questions that inevitably came to our mind was around affordability, data, domain knowledge, change management, and leverage. And as we started to think more about it, we thought to ourselves, well, these have to be common constraints among most manufacturers. And then I sought then others who would share my passion for innovative data use in manufacturing, who could also perhaps educate me on the national initiatives that were going around within the US. This led me, of course, to Bruce Kramer, whose enthusiasm and support have been tremendously amazing to me in refining my ideas. He also introduced me to Jim Davis, whose background obviously would give anybody pause. So amazing background, a historian truly. But I think, saying it more succinctly, what brought me here to this particular group, or rather what brought us together, I think at fundamental level is a desire to do something radical and groundbreaking in the smart manufacturing space.
Fantastic. Those aren't words that we often hear inside of manufacturing domain, right? Talking about being radical. Absolutely interested to learn more about it. But I want to go to Haresh for a second and ask essentially the same question that I asked Sthitie. Haresh, why is this important to CESMII and to you personally?
Sure, Mike. So there are actually two aspects to this. One is that, as you know, CESMII has been doing a lot of work in smart manufacturing by taking some of the technologies and actually making demonstrations across multiple industry verticals. And these are all solutions where we feel like they're specifically focused on a particular manufacturer, on a particular process or a piece of equipment. In this case, we're looking at a coalition of manufacturers, that are making up a supply chain. And the challenges that we have in terms of getting the data in a standard format so that the AI development can take place on top of it was an opportunity for us to get engaged, because we have worked on technologies that enable easy connectivity to the machines in a standard form, so that when you have 5 or 7 same type of machines or processes, you are assured that the information that you're getting is in a standard fashion, so that when you aggregate them, when you combine them, when you create this data layer that has information coming from all of these factories in a supply chain, that you don't have to worry about in what form it came, or you have to the least amount of juggling of that data that you have to do. And so we saw that as a great opportunity for us to demonstrate what we can do for an important supply chain like this. So.
Yeah, having a foundation of data upon which to do all these things certainly fits with the CESMII mission. So Sthitie, let's come back to you. And Jim mentioned one of the outcomes of the workshops was commitment for new business model for AI-enabled smart manufacturing with these 12 companies that are committing to share data and aggregate data for their mutual benefit. Can you enlighten us on that and tell us how this came about? Because it seems like a very big deal.
Sure. Thank you. So the commitment to share data really was a matter of economics. It came from a need for us to be more competitive as manufacturers. It came from asking deeper questions such as, how do we leverage the potential of data and AI at scale within our factories like other industries have done? Can we exploit the commonalities in the process and tool space? Are the data that we have spent years investing, harvesting, giving us sufficient returns? Are we ready to manage the fundamental changes that we know AI will bring into our manufacturing systems, people, and processes? And it turns out that at least in the smart manufacturing space, the answer is yes, if we are willing to commit to seeing how it can be done. The commitments from us manufacturers, therefore, is that we converge on common focus areas, that we come to the table ready to talk at a granular level. What data are we willing to share? For what purpose? What levels of granularity in terms of sanitization would they need to be at? So it's a commitment really to exercise the house of collaboration. If we want to do collaborative data and algorithm development, which really what this coalition of manufacturers is about, we cannot do that without embracing AI, of course, and we cannot embrace AI without talking about data. So at a fundamental level, we're committed to more collectively arriving at a common language on data use, value, and more importantly, and I think this goes back to Haresh's point, how do we collectively process, harvest, aggregate our data to achieve the edge we need as manufacturers? In my mind, collaboration doesn't just happen. So we are here today because of a very concerted effort from all of us in stitching together this by our commitment to share data, to exercise use cases. And I think the most important part is to find common grounds that are winning grounds for all of us manufacturers.
Jim, would you like to comment on that? This is one of the first things that you highlighted in your introduction and setting the stage for us here about this commitment from these companies and new business models. So you want to give us your perspective as well on the power of what you're getting at here?
Yeah, and let me bring a couple of pieces together, which I think we use the word data a lot. And one of the things I'd really like to do, and this is one of the places where Sthitie and I are really joined at the hip, you have to get the data right for any of this to work. In the first surge of AI, we spent a lot of time on the knowledge side of it and on the structure side of it. and we didn't have the data. And we were very, very aware, very keenly aware about how we couldn't do things because we didn't have the data. And today we have the data, but we don't, it seems to be understated. We're just not focusing enough of the right attention, get the data put in the right way to do this. If you go back to the old days as well, I'll use that term, when we started structuring the knowledge, that became the precursors from a CESMII standpoint to what we started calling templates, and then information models, and then they became profiles, and then there's a whole bodies of groups now working on profiles and standards and so forth. So it's getting to a place where you can structure the knowledge so you can work with the data in the best possible way. But the question becomes, and still, where do you get the data and how do you bring it together in the right way? And this is where working with Sthitie and working with these roundtables has become most interesting, because we have really been able to ask the question, where am I going to get the data? How am I going to get it from these machines? What am I going to use it for? How do I put it together? How do I aggregate it? How do I scale it, like Sthitie is saying, and put it together in a way that's useful? And oh, by the way, what I found most interesting, or equally interesting, I should say, is that along the way, they found many, many more value points. If we could process the data in similar ways, if we could anonymize the data in similar ways, we save all kinds of resources and staffing in order to get the data put right. So scaling actually has benefits in many, many more ways than just aggregating the data, although it's still a very, very important aspect. So this use case that Sthitie talking about is just opened the door, the floodgates to a whole set of value points that we're really starting to play out with the companies. But it still requires this commitment of the companies to come to the table and be willing to have these discussions that Sthitie is talking about.
Yeah, and we'll come back to the use cases, but maybe just stick with that for one more second. So Sthitie seems to me to be way out in as far as a leader is concerned, forward thinking, et cetera. Are there lots of other folks like Sthitie that are out there leading this, and they were easy to find, or like, are you finding other manufacturing leaders that are saying, yeah, we know we have to do this, we see the potential, and so we're willing to come and have the discussions? Or how hard has that been for you to find folks like Sthitie? For you, Jim, just wondering from your perspective.
There's multiples of us that could answer that. I personally think that this Seagate, the semiconductor example, is particularly out in front because of the steps that Sthitie has taken, and then what we've been able to do at the roundtable to work with the data like I was describing. It's not to say there aren't other industries that are moving along very, very strongly on this, but we still see quite a bit of work on the factory side. But as I was saying in the beginning, if I fast forward between 2020 and 2024, the interest in being able to move this along is very, very high. But the doing part of it is where things are stuck. And I think what Sthitie and Seagate and the microelectronics company are doing is very far out in actually doing it. But everyone's interested in starting to do things with it.
I'd just like to add that I spend most of my time explaining to industry why they should be interested. This is a completely unique example for me of someone from industry coming and asking me if I am interested.
And Bruce, maybe stick with that for a second. Like, when you have those conversations with people, why are maybe 2 points? What is the feedback you're getting as to why it's hard, right? Why is it so hard? And then your response, how do you frame it up as far as its importance?
Well, in part, it's because the benefits of data aggregation seem remote to manufacturers, and they also tend to exaggerate the value of homegrown solutions. They're accustomed to developing solutions in-house and solving their problems in-house. And the problem is that we can sit here and question that, but they've just spent 4 weeks getting an application to work and another couple of months climbing the yield curve to get the economic benefit from the process. And that going through that makes them feel that what they've learned is very valuable and needs to be assiduously protected from discovery by anybody else. The problem with that is that it discounts the value of being able to find someone else who has already solved the same problem and climbed the learning curve, and you could essentially access that proven solution in seconds rather than spending months doing it on your own. That's why we need a concrete demonstration of value to help to let manufacturers see what the potential benefits of accessing a proven knowledge infrastructure of the past experience of all manufacturers to gain the productivity benefits that can be derived from that. And I just want to point out that manufacturing in the United States is about a $2.5 trillion industry, and that means that there's a $25 billion market opportunity for U.S. manufacturers for every 1% improvement in productivity, not to mention the competitive benefits to the country that will derive from that productivity improvement. So the stakes are very high here.
Yeah. Well, Haresh, from your perspective, why are collaboration and data sharing so important? And you've been working with manufacturers. Jim talked about the work that you've been doing to get the the data collected and organized and modeled and such. So why is it so important from your perspective, and why is it so hard?
Yeah, I think data sharing is important from two standpoints, right? One is that if you have similar processes, if you have one factory with one particular process, you're going to get the data that you get from that. And then that's going to be a slice of the section of operating conditions that you'll experience, right? And AI models work because they're being fed data that they can work on, right? Now, just imagine if that data was made richer because you have similar processes across multiple factories and they are operating slightly differently, but they're presenting data also in a slightly different operating environment. And therefore, the data becomes richer, right? So sharing data makes it richer, and therefore, the AI algorithms and the applications that are developed on top of it become more accurate and more richer, right? And more broadly applicable. So that's an immediate benefit. The other part of data sharing is that, it's also about the supply chain. When you share that data, you're now able to actually do optimization at a supply chain level because the data is being fed from one manufacturer to another in their supply chain. So at some point in time, the Seagate coalition that we have is not just going to look at the data that's similar from similar processes, but they should now be able to look at data across these processes and then optimize at a supply chain level. Now, it is hard, right? I mean, if you go to the manufacturer, it's going to be hard to convince them, as Bruce was saying. But when you take those benefits and talk to them, then it becomes a little clear. There will be privacy concerns, there will be security concerns, there will be IP concerns, yes. But I think if you give them the carrot and if you tell them that here's the benefit, then I think you can turn that around. And we've experienced that in many other use cases that we've done. And back in my life with the 30 years of R&D that I did in industrial settings, we had the same challenges even within the same company. But we did overcome them once you start talking about the value.
So you've referenced, Sthitie, if I could come back to you for just a second, because the group has referenced a couple of times the Seagate coalition. So are these members of your supply chain? And maybe if you could just talk a little bit about on the business side, the conversation we're having here about why it's hard to get people to share data and stuff. How did you handle those conversations? Did you have to do it internally first? And what has that been like from a sort of organizational perspective to have those conversations?
Yes, I did have to have that conversation internally with Seagate management first. It is not an easy conversation, but I think it is more because of the history. It's always been like this. And when we really start to talk about the economics of why we need to do it and the potential, the conversation then becomes easier. And then, that is exactly what we had to do with the other companies as well. First, it was like, well, this cannot be done. We're too different. And then when you start to think about, we use similar tools, there must be similar processes. difference of operating conditions might actually help enrich, not actually deteriorate, right? And again, economics, there is huge potential that we're leaving. And going back to Bruce's point also, we cannot do this alone. We're making the same mistakes over and over again with one machine. The same application then needs to be redone all over again for another use case. This is not how we can make step function changes. We can only do marginal. And this was the main conversation that drove these companies to come to the table, really. And we're mostly small and medium-sized fabs.
Like Bruce said, that 1% for the country is an enormous financial benefit. So the value is certainly there. But I appreciate your work there to help lead that and drive that. Jim, if I can come back to you, one of the points of emphasis that we've talked about already and coming out of the workshops was the need to focus on a use case. Can you explain what you mean by that and its importance?
Yeah, do we have a week?
3 minutes.
Let me segue into that question, just to pick up on something that Sthitie was saying. I was going to jump in. One of the really, I call it remarkable things that Sthitie and her efforts have put on the table is a real quantification and value of the data. Sthitie can talk about this quite a bit, but the ability to go in and put some value on the data from a manufacturer standpoint becomes very, very important. We know the provider side has been doing this for a while, but the manufacturer side, it's just difficult to understand exactly what the value is. But there's real backup and real backing with analysis and quantification on the statements that Sthitie is making. This was really key in terms of, I think, motivating this forward. And then that actually segues then into the use case, because when we brought the companies together, now you take a look at, well, what data do we have and where does this come together? And this particular example is very rich in data, and as Sthitie is talking about, the machines are pretty similar across these companies. They're used for similar kinds of functions, even though the products are very different. And so there's a lot of possibility about how to bring the data together. And we've been able to use the use case to start looking at that pretty deeply. And there's lots of aspects to the value of doing that with a use case. We're able to bring different views. We're able to ask the question, well, how do I put together a suite of anonymization or protection techniques? How do I put that together? How do I put consistent processes together, and so forth? But the biggest of which is we've seen really unique and different ways to aggregate data and get value out of it that one wouldn't even necessarily expect. And that's all as a result of there being a use case and being able to look at it in multiple ways. And I'm hoping, Sthitie, I set the stage for you to comment a little further. But it's very, very powerful, this use case, in so many facets of this.
Yes. I mean, I think it drives the right kind of conversations, right? You're not talking about just very high-level roadmaps and what we will do in 20 years, but rather what can we do today? And it's also a different mindset, in terms of thinking about how different we are and how we cannot share. The question then, the conversation becomes, well, how do we share? So, but where are the common grounds? So, you can, if you start to think about differences, you'll find plenty. But if you start to focus on commonalities, then you're really getting somewhere. And these use cases have enabled us to do that as well.
Haresh, would you like to comment? I know CESMII's focused for some time on use cases, the importance of showing value to folks. So anything from the CESMII side to add to this conversation around the use cases?
Yeah, I think what's really fantastic to see is the willingness of the manufacturers that Sthitie has brought in, right? I mean, so when we look for a use case, we don't want to look at it purely from a technology standpoint, right? It has to be from the standpoint of the manufacturers to say that, yes, we want to do this. And yes, we have seen the value of doing it. That drives everything else, right? And then comes the technology. And then fortunately for us, we want to be able to show that the technologies that we have been successfully showing for unit processes can also be applied across these multiple manufacturers and multiple processes. So that to us is very, very attractive. And then it also helps understand what are the challenges that we should be addressing, right, in terms of our technologies as they mature. So this seemed like a perfect use case for that purpose.
So for the group, was the use case determined before the workshops, or did they come out through the process of this investigation? And I guess how did the use case come to be defined that you were able to take to other companies and engage?
I think another different part about this workshop that we've been working on for the past year has been the very first thing we did was actually the industry roundtable, where we said, okay, can we as an industry, as a coalition, come together with a list of focus areas? So that was the very first thing we did. What were the problems that are important to us collectively as a group of companies? And it was from that list that use cases were determined. It was very much industry driven.
Wonderful. Jim, did I cut you off? Are you going to say something?
No. I just want to chime in, and both of these conversations fill in one other point. To what Haresh is saying, as we're saying, CESMII has worked very hard to kind of streamline the availability and accessibility of contextualized data, and then making it available to multiple uses and applications. That's kind of a foundational step here. But there's another word that we haven't really brought up strongly yet. I want to put it on the table. We use the word integration. So let's say we get the data in each of these factories in a consistent contextualized form. You actually have to have gone through some processes to do that. And so we use the term CESMII profile, but you actually have to use that profile consistently. And then once you actually use the profile to collect data, you actually now have to say, well, I need to process it in a certain way. I need to normalize it. I need to deal with missing data in an appropriate way. I need to aggregate it. I need to, when I bring it together, I need to process it further. I need to ask what algorithm am I using it for if we're going to use it in cross-company aggregated way. So this term of aggregation actually captures a whole set of processes and workflow that has to happen on top of just getting the data collected and put into a good form. And I want to stress that because that was actually one of the big recommendations that came out of our earlier workshops. One of the things that was missing, and Bruce, you had used the term demonstration, but one of the things that's missing is we have a tendency to do a deep dive on a technology and go down and try to develop it to its fullest extent, but we don't tend to want to put all the components together and show how they work together. And there's just a whole lot to understand and experience and R&D in bringing that together. So one of the things that's happening on this workshop is the commitments to deal with this integration. So it's actually a breadth effort versus depth with existing technology. And let's just move and see what we can do with existing technology and how we do the integration. And that's going to carry things a long way, because that's a very hard thing to do, and that's missing in action on a lot of these activities we're seeing across industries.
But Jim, there's also a need to go beyond the existing methods, and this is a key enabler for that as well. I mean, if we can make the business opportunity concrete, it will encourage researchers to develop the new software tools that are needed to allow U.S. entrepreneurs to develop this service infrastructure that will eventually emerge. And I want to explain that that's the model that created the browsers, search engines, and AI applications that power the internet. I mean, the government built out the network, the universities demonstrated the software tools, and the American economy financed the worldwide dominance of the U.S. companies that adopted those technologies. So it can happen in manufacturing. I guess to coin a phrase maybe, we have to change the manufacturing mindset to make that sound like an enticing opportunity.
Yeah. No, a real quick comment, Mike, on that. Bruce, I'm glad you brought that up. In the last roundtable, we brought 10 or 11 researchers from outside engineering. Many of them were from outside engineering, and the richness with which we were able to see and understand some techniques that had not been used, methods and techniques, approaches and thinking, was very, very rich. And we have a whole other set of things that we're now taking a look at. And that's pretty rich direction. Again, it's not near term, but it's going to set some real, I call them medium term actions in motion here.
Yeah, they seemed hungry to get their hands on some data to develop some new methods.
So Bruce, maybe sticking with you here, appreciate the work that's been done from all of you. And to Jim's earlier point, we don't have a week to talk through this, so we have to sort of start to glide toward an ending here. But can you talk about what's next? How does all of this lead or drive us toward implementation?
I'd really like to make two observations. One is that I think there is a widespread misconception in the smart manufacturing world that machine learning methods are a sort of a logical extension of the physics-based modeling that we've been doing. And that the problem with that is that machine learning methods are associative methods, and they're not predictive. What they do is, given a large amount of data, they will estimate which actual data from real life experience is most relevant to your current narrow problem. So as Haresh was saying, if there's a limited amount of data to choose from, it will pick the closest one, even if it may not be particularly relevant to your situation. So the importance of having a broad diversity of data is that it increases the chance that you'll find the data that you really need to solve your problem. And that's a really new thing. So we need to think of it that way. Beyond that, I would say, don't dismiss the experiences of other industries. I mean, the manufacturing world does not live in isolation. There are many other industries. Almost every other industry has transformed itself by using these tools in the ways I've been describing. Manufacturing thinks of itself as so different that all of this experience doesn't apply. If there's one fundamental thing that's come through the 3 years that we've been running these workshops, is that is not true. The experience of other industries does apply. We've got a manufacturing-related data privacy issue that is much more difficult to overcome than in other industries. But I just want to make the point that those industries put data access first. They solved that problem before they solved any other problem. And the way they did it is to provide services to their potential customers that were so valuable that the customers were happy to give up their data to receive the services. And manufacturing has every opportunity to do that. We just have to find a way to break through.
So would anybody else like to comment your view on how where you are right now, what we're discussing today drives toward implementation? Sthitie, do you have thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. I think everything that we're doing actually as part of this workshop is execution focused, implementation focused. So yes, there is a long held reticence in sharing data. And I do believe that we need to go beyond our factory floors, beyond our machines to really make the kind of difference that manufacturing can. And I think that, one thing that we have to also realize is that AI is actually a strategic and a financial necessity for us. It's not just a luxury. It is emerging technology, yes, but it can only be, we can only realize its full potential by implementing them at scale. And this workshop that Jim and I are chairing with a lot of help from NSF, CESMII, and NIST is out to really tap into that potential. And I'm very excited to see what we will do here, what this group will do in the next months, next few months, and even a year.
Yeah, I am equally excited to see where things go. So I guess here, if we can sort of move toward closure here with a last question for each of you, we'll go around the horn, maybe starting with you, Jim. We've talked here about mindset. You talked about new business models, cross-company data aggregation, gathering data at scale. Those are all things that I would say are, take a particular mindset, right? So as we wrap up, could each of you just give us your key takeaways from the conversation here today, what you've done, what lies ahead, so that everybody has a frame with which to walk away and think differently about AI in smart manufacturing. Jim, you want to start with us?
Yeah, but I'm not wrapping up. I have two additional observations. They fit. The first is building on what Bruce is saying. The term digital twin is used a lot these days. It's a big wave out there, and it's fluid, and it depends on what you mean by it. But if you do mean a high fidelity model that can do prediction, what we're seeing is a huge advantage of leveraging the intrinsic value of the data in the associative sense that Bruce is talking about with the digital twins, and you build the two together. It's not an either or situation. You build the two together. But we are seeing that if you can aggregate data, you can take advantage of the intrinsic value of the data fast and get real benefit and start building towards these digital twins that are going to serve the industry and the use in a very practical way in the long term. You have to ask about the cost of it. That's one. I just want to get digital twin on the table. The other one is a very quick comment that ties back to something that Sthitie mentioned. We haven't mentioned workforce development and training yet. That is a very important element, and I think everyone's going to agree. What we are observing that's the wrong word, experiencing. It's more than just observing. Experiencing in what we're doing here is that, and not to take away from the workforce development and all those efforts that are going on, but when you want to implement this, the workforce development takes on a much more of a change management character to it. And so you want to have the tool, you want to think about it from a change management standpoint. How do you work this in, start the staff starting to do things with the data? How do they work with the data? And validation of the data becomes really important. And do they have the tools to do it? Those are kind of missing in action, like Bruce is talking about. So if you can think about training, change management, and tools in a consistent way with some simple tools, you got some ingredients to really begin implementation.
Appreciate that. And so then, Haresh, how about your thoughts? Takeaways here for us today for our audience.
Well, I think there's a tremendous strength in collaborative development, right? I mean, that's really what stands out about this particular effort. And we have a great opportunity to demonstrate it. And I've said this before that, the engagement with manufacturing will only happen if you can demonstrate that these things work. And we've done that in point solutions. We've done it, like Bruce was saying, we've taken small pieces of it and we've demonstrated it. But the power of actually taking data and aggregating it across multiple manufacturers, across the supply chain, and then doing collaborative work and then showing it that it actually works and it results in the value that Sthitie was talking about, nothing like it.
Excellent. Sthitie, and then we'll go to Bruce for our final voice. You have a key takeaway for everybody here today, Sthitie?
And every time I hear these gentlemen speak, the word that comes to mind is confluence. I just feel like all the right ingredients are here. We're talking about just the right things. And everybody is willing. We just have to just do it, I think. So that's always my key takeaway when we have these discussions. And it still is today.
Move to action. Love it. Bruce, you want to give us a final point here? Take us home?
Happy to. I think they're great points all. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And I think it's important to keep in mind that this is a first step. It's so hard to take the first step, and it's an enabling step. And it's important to keep in mind that the methods we are talking about are currently PhD-driven methods. They're invented by PhDs and implemented by PhDs. The problem goes way beyond training. These methods need to be much simpler and easy to use. And I can clearly envision a future of smart manufacturing in which this service delivery infrastructure is accessed with the ease of an internet search today. And it's not that way in manufacturing at all. We're not behind. I think every country is in exactly the same place that we are. But our economy has shown the ability to innovate and seize leadership in these areas over and over again. Two of the largest companies in the world barely existed 30 years ago, and they were driven by harvesting these tools to dominate their industries. And we need to seize our advantage in manufacturing. It's wonderful to get started. Thanks to all of you.
Yes, thanks to all of you. Thanks to Sthitie and to Jim and to Haresh and to Bruce and for the extended team that's doing this work, for sharing what you've learned so far with us, for your leadership. We appreciate you being here today. I would also like to thank SME for the value that they bring in helping us build out the ecosystem and in helping to instill the right mindset. So again, for those of you viewing us, I would encourage you to get to know CESMII, to follow them on LinkedIn, to check them out at CESMII.org, to listen to these events and all past events on Apple Music or Spotify, and join us again next month for the next event in our series. We typically hold these events on the last Tuesday of each month, so I'd encourage you to mark your calendar and join us again on May 28th for the next event. And until then, I would encourage you that when you think of smart manufacturing, think differently. Thanks, everybody.